Welcome everyone. Thank you for coming out on this chilly night. My name is Elizabeth Long. I'm the Mayor of Central Goldfields Shire. Before I begin, I just would like to acknowledge our CEO, Miss Lucy Roffey, and Councillor Anna de Villiers. Oh, there you are. Is Councillor Sproul here? I don't think so. He didn't come. So before I begin, I just would like to do an acknowledgement of country. I would like to acknowledge and extend my appreciation for the Dja Dja Wurrung people, the traditional owners of the land that we are standing on today. Today, we pay our respects to leaders and elders past, present and emerging, for they hold the memories, the traditions, the culture and the hopes of all Dja Dja Wurrung people. We express our gratitude in the sharing of this land, our sorrow for the personal, spiritual and cultural cost of that sharing, and hope that we may walk forward together in harmony and in the spirit of healing. Sorry, just swap notes. For those that were flooded, I've walked in your shoes. I've been flooded in Katherine, in the Australia Day floods, so I know what it's like, and I know the angst and fear that some of you still feel because my house went completely underwater, so I totally understand that. And that's why we're here tonight. A power of work has gone into this report that Fred will be presenting to us. But tonight's not about the past, tonight's about the future. So I would like to hand over to Max. Oh, and a huge thank you to the reference group who have done an amazing amount of work in helping Fred with his report, getting everything together, and council too, council staff. Any reports that were needed were made available. So thank you to everyone who has made the effort to put this report together. And now I'll hand over to Max Hardy to facilitate the evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Thought I may as well stand as well. So I'm Max Hardy, and I had the pleasure of assisting with this process. So council asked me to help design and facilitate the reference group process that was advising Fred to do the review. As the Mayor's just said, a lot of work's gone into it. The reference group have been brilliant throughout. I might just get you to stand up so people know who you are. I know there's a lot of people standing up the back who weren't in the reference group, apart from Wayne was. So just an indication of those people who've been, and those who are standing up who are part of the reference group, you can just give a wave. There we go, it might set you apart from the others. So they've done a brilliant job. And Keith, that's right. So we've had, how many meetings have we had? Maybe 5, I think. Too many since April or so, I think, when we got going. I can't remember now. But it's been a great effort. I think the reference group have provided a lot of information, asked a lot of questions, have assisted Fred with his work. So essentially tonight is Fred talking about the main findings and recommendations of his work. If you want to go really technical with technical questions, Fred will be happy to talk to you for hours and hours about technical stuff. At the same time, I think there's probably some things that it'd be really good probably to get through the key recommendations. And look, we're aiming to finish around about 8 formally. I think it'd be good to hear from council about like what happens next after having got to this point. But if people want to hang around after that point because you've got more questions, things you want to talk about, Fred says he's got nothing better to do except return to a motel in Maryborough. So Fred is around. So after we formally finish, say, at 8 o'clock, Fred will be around if you want to keep talking. But I think it's good to sort of finish strong with kind of what happens next with everyone in the room together. Didn't want to assume how long people could or stay around. So that's all good. We are live streaming as well, and we think there will be quite a few people interested in following things. So Tim's doing that for us. Thanks, Tim. And he'll be sort of waving people out of the way if they happen to walk down the middle corridor, which will get in the way of the streaming. So I'm going to hand over to Fred Spain, is a renowned expert, and we're very fortunate that through the reference group people, I think that he was identified as someone who's really knowledgeable in this space and has a wealth of knowledge and practical experience, and you'll probably get the impression that he's right into levies when you hear him talk. And so let's hear from Fred, and then we'll hear from Fred, and then we'll open it up to questions. If people have a burning question along the way, you're happy to take it?
Yell out, please.
Yell out. So just, and I'll be looking around. So give us a wave, and we'll try and capture questions. At the same time, show a bit of restraint if you can, and we'll have some open Q&A at the end as well. So it might be good to move through it as much as possible. But if there's a really, really super burning question in response to something Fred said that you don't understand, maybe just, can you run that by us again? That might be useful, but we'll try and have plenty of time for questions and answers at the end. So over to you, Fred.
Okay, thank you very much. As you may or may not know, I work for the New South Wales Government. I'm not a consultant or private consultant sort of thing anyway. Over 35 years with the government. A lot of experience in irrigation areas, irrigation channels. Government was doing that some years ago. A lot of water supply, sewage projects, pipelines, fishways, etc. So I do more things other than just levees, but predominantly through my career I have worked on quite a number of levees. Levee design, construction, been involved in flood studies, flood modelling, but probably more importantly, in New South Wales, I'm part of the engineering emergency management team. Basically, we provide engineering advice to the combat agencies during an emergency. So what happens during a flood, they ring up our organisation, me in particular, and go, Fred, what is going to happen to this levee during this flood? And oftentimes I'm going out there on site, looking at levees, looking at the defects in the levees, looking at the flooding behind it. Half the time it's in the middle of the night, etc, etc. I've provided advice to the combat agency where I know full well that a town is going to be evacuated based on my advice. At the same token, I've also given advice where I've said, don't worry about it, leave it as it is, and don't even bother evacuating the town. I've had some funny looks on that one too anyway. So not only do I talk the talk, but I have to walk the walk. I've been out on site, I can see what happens in reality. There's the theory, the flood modelling, etc. But then you come to site and you go, yeah, what I thought was a little problem there isn't. Now that's not the main problem. It's something else over here sort of thing there anyway. So that's just a bit of background to my experience. We provide a lot of advice to the councils up where we are. We do a lot of levee inspections. We've got 120 odd urban levees around the state where we've gone to at least 90% of them at the moment and looked at them, etc. sort of thing. So it's something we do on a fairly regular basis as well anyway. So that's just a bit of my knowledge and expertise as well anyway. I got involved in this because your state government department dobbed me in for it. We've been having regular talks with them for about 18 months sort of thing, and one time they rang me up and said, Fred, there's people down at Carisbrook, they want some advice, independent advice. Would you mind doing it? So that's how I got involved in this one anyway. Okay, big thanks to Council, big thanks to the reference group. For those who may or may not know, we've had a Teams meeting, a virtual platform basically, where we can share information, share documents, and certainly correct that anything I've asked for, I basically received. The reference group in particular have gone over and above, gone out on site. Oh, can you have a look over there? Can you get me some photos? Yep, out there and away we go. So a big thanks to everybody for putting in a big effort to that one as well anyway. So looked at a lot of document, a lot of photos, a lot of plans, a lot of conversations, a lot of questions sort of thing. Probably I'll start off at the beginning your process started after the 2011 flood. You got WaterTech involved to do some flood modelling for you. So I'll start off by explaining that a bit, which was quite helpful to the reference group to understand as well too, because they had a lot of questions. How accurate is that modelling? We don't believe it captured, this water from Flagstaff was one of the questions, sort of thing there anyway. So in the flood studies, and there have been two, the consultants used two flood models, one called RORBS, RORBS, and the other one called Mike Flood. RORBS, for simplicity purposes, it's a catchment-wide flood model. They define the catchment from north of Carisbrook, over to Marysborough, down around, south of Clunes to almost the Ballarat airport, swinging around the other side and up this way, a really big catchment. So that was some of the concerns. Hang on, it's not capturing Flagstaff or something like that. We can't see it, but I can see it in the modelling. They definitely did include everything basically. The first thing they do in setting up these models is look at past flood events. They picked the 2010 and 2011 flood events to calibrate their models. They looked at the rainfall figures that they could glean, the river creek levels, even though twice the monitoring failed on them. They, after the flooding in town, surveyors came out and they got height marks for the flood levels around town as well too. So what they were doing was calibrating the model and comparing it to what actually happened there anyway. It's a difficult job. There isn't a rain gauge right in the middle of Carisbrook, and not every rain gauge, every square kilometre sort of thing. So they had a bit of a difficult time, but they've done the best that they could, in my opinion. They've done the best they could with what they had anyway. RORBS, they divided the catchment up into little sub-catchments, 420 odd little sub-catchments, and they calculate the rain falling on each of those catchments, where it goes out of the catchment to the next catchment, add that one onto the sub-catchment below it, etc, etc, etc. Very detailed, very complicated. I remember doing those sort of calculations at university. I had to take my shoes and socks off, and it was a difficult exercise to do. But with computers nowadays and the raw modelling, it's certainly a lot easier. The raw modelling they used, it's a very well-known piece of software, quite accurate. A lot of consultants use it, sort of thing. The beauty of it is it's very fast running, so they can put the storm, shall we say, of the 2011 storm event, put that in the model, run it and see what happens. Oh, that didn't quite work, so they adjust the model a bit, move the storm a little bit north, a little bit south, whatever, sort of thing. So they're making adjustments all the time to try and match what actually happened on the ground. So they were doing that with both the 2010 and 2011 flood event as well too, and they got close enough. You're never going to be perfect. It's a computer model or any model. We're talking a big flood event that occurred, so you're never going to match things to the nearest millimetre. There's always going to be little uncertainties here and there, and they've acknowledged that in the report as well too anyway. So look, with what they had to use, they've done a good enough job. The second part is the Mike Flood model. Not too sure what Mike stands for, but it's Dutch. It's from a Dutch company, and what the Dutch don't know about flooding isn't worth knowing. So it's a very sophisticated program, very well known, no dramas with that sort of thing. What they did with the Mike Flood model is they put that around Carisbrook itself. So you've got this big, wide, catchment-wide RORBS model. It comes in close enough to Carisbrook, and then they in essence, insert the Mike flood model in a rectangle. So if you read the reports, you'll see this rectangle in there. What they do is put the output from the Raub's model as the input into the Mike flood model. The advantage of the Mike flood model, it produces lovely plans for you, nice pretty colours, and works out the flow going here, there and everywhere, sort of thing, depths, velocities, you name it, sort of thing there anyway. Again, Dick, that's what I would expect a flood modeller to actually do nowadays anyway. But you'll see that in the report as well anyway. So you'll see a number of input points south of the cemetery, the tip over the western side, 2 or 3, 4 locations over there, obviously McCallum's Creek, obviously Tullaroop Creek coming in as well too anyway. So that's all coming into that point there anyway. So they did a good model run on that one, and they modelled the 2011, 2010 flood events and compared that to the water levels in there, plus or minus 100, plus or minus 200 mil in some of the levels and whatever. But again, that's just par for the course anyway. So what they then did was have a series of design storm events for 1 in 5, 1 in 10, 1 in 20, 1 in 50, 1 in 100 and 1 in 200 storm events. Standard, that's what everybody does to work out what's happening for the different size storms and different size floods that you have anyway. Same thing, run it through the Raub's model, put that into the Mike flood model, and away you go from there anyway. The Mike flood model is based on LiDAR. For those of you who don't know, that's an aircraft flying at 10,000 feet or something like that, shooting down lasers onto the ground, getting the position of those points on the ground, X and Y coordinates spatially, as well as the height. So they used 1 metre LiDAR. So this table is about 1 metre by 1 metre, that's 1 square metre. So for every point on the ground, they know exactly where that is and exactly what height it is. Not exactly, but plus or minus 100 millimetres. I talk in millimetres. By the way, I don't talk in centimetres, I don't talk in whatever, I talk in millimetres. I'm an engineer, so I talk in 100 millimetres, or for the older members of the community, 4 inches. So they know, if a plane flew overhead and we didn't have the roof here, they'd know the table was this high, they'd know the floor was that high. So one question I was asked is, where's the contour map? Where's the contour map that the flood modelers used? Well, they didn't use the contour map because they had something far better. They had the LiDAR. So that's what was used in the Raub's model to determine the catchment and the flows and all this sort of stuff and areas, etc., as well as the Mike flood model. I showed a picture, and it's in the report of an example of a computer model of 3D. It's the mesh in there sort of thing. It looks like what you think of in a laboratory, shall we say, where they actually build physical models. Part of our organisation, Manly Hydraulics Laboratory, they build physical models. They've got big swimming pools, they build models. They can do that, they put the dams on there and model things and things like that. What the Mike flood does is build a model in the computer. It goes through a series of algorithms to work out where the water flows, how high it is and how it splits apart and all the rest of it sort of thing. My colleague that I was talking to about this project, Bob Clark, he's an ex-modeller, he's a Levee designer, and he said, Fred, we know how gravity works, we know water flows downhill. And that's exactly right. They've known it for decades, really. So, and that's the way the computer models have been developed. They are accurate. I can tell you that. I can attest to that from experience. They are accurate. Not perfect, but they are accurate. accurate enough to be useful. That's a good phrase. Accurate enough to be useful. Okay, so they went through and did that, and then they said, all right, well, you know, we can see the water flooding through Carisbrook there. What are we going to do about it? We're going to put some levees in, we're going to put some culverts in, we're going to do this, that and the other sort of thing. So they actually put those levees into the model. They stitched that into the terrain, the levee, for example, the culverts, you know, et cetera, they rerun the model and they go, oh, this is what happened. You know, yes, it's going to protect Carisbrook from flooding or not, or you know, waters that would have gone here goes up there and all over the place. So that's the what-if scenarios that they go through. Yeah, so they did a series of those model runs, sort of thing. A few things that I'll just start off with, and I'll start at the bottom end at Williams Road, down near the cemetery there anyway. A concern was expressed by the community and certainly the Cemetery Trust. Hang on, you know, the cemetery is now flooding. What's going on there? Because there's a levee, if you don't know, along Williams Road. They modelled the levee, they designed the levee, they built the levee on Williams Road. Surprise, surprise, the flooding that would have gone across Williams Road doesn't go across Williams Road anymore. It goes in the cemetery and underneath Langrigan Road and out the bluestone drain that's down there. That's what's supposed to happen anyway. However, practically, things aren't quite right there anyway. In my investigations, I looked at the modelling results, I looked at the design crest levels, I looked at the workers executed drawings, and I found some issues there. You know, a couple of points in the workers executed drawings didn't meet the design height. Looking at the profile from the flood model results themselves, I haven't made anything out of this, by the way. Everything that I've looked at has come from these reports. I haven't rerun models or anything like that. I'm just reading the reports and picking things out of it to go, hang on, this matches up or no, it doesn't, sort of thing there anyway. So I picked up a few issues that, hang on, the flood model water level is actually higher than the crest of the levee in a few locations, in a couple of locations. So that's an issue for you that needs to be looked at as well too anyway. The other thing that, look, I'm just jumping around a bit, I'm not exactly following the sequence of the report, but it's all in there anyway. The other thing the design consultants Insura did was freeboard. We need a margin for error. We need a margin for error. You can't just take the theoretical, that's the flood model water level, it'll be millimetre perfect. You've got to build a little bit higher. That's freeboard, a factor of safety or a margin for error is really the better way to describe it. The sum total of their assessment of freeboard was, for the purposes of the preliminary design, we'll make it 300 millimetres. That was the only thought that they put into it. Let's make it 300 millimetres. If you go to the Victorian levee guidelines, it actually says start off at 600 millimetres, but you can vary it up and down based on local conditions or something or other. I couldn't see any discussion in the Insura documents or anywhere else that even attempted to discuss why they chose 300 millimetres. That's quite an important factor of safety, margin for error, that every levee has to have. We in New South Wales do what's called a freeboard assessment. You'll see an example of that in my report for Wagga Wagga, one for the Wagga levee and another one for the North Wagga levee. It's trying to put a bit more rigour little bit more science behind, well, what is the margin for error? What should it be in particular circumstances? One thing you may read from that is, Wagga, if you don't know, is on the Murrumbidgee River. They did modelling some years ago now of it, sort of thing. But one thing they determined in conjunction with the flood modellers was really the modelling itself is probably plus or minus 300 millimetre accurate anyway. It's not any more perfect than that. There's variability. That one component just wipes out your 300mm freeboard in the first place. And there's other factors as well too. You've got a brand new levee, I use the term, you've got the new cast bell to the levee at the moment. That'll quickly fade. 10, 15 years, 20, 30 years, you're going to have problems with the levees. You're going to have little dips that occur. You're going to have little cracking, other defects, etc. Because these levees, 70-year life plus, easy. They're there forever. I can guarantee you that now. I've yet to see any council go, nah, we don't need the levee anymore, we'll take it down. They just keep it there, build it higher if anything anyway. So that's the thing and the other components of a freeboard analysis that you go, well, yeah, well, let's look to the future. What'll happen, and I'll bet money on it, when we go into a drought cycle, you're not even going to think about the levee. Maintenance of the levee will start dropping off, or we need to pour our resources into something else or whatever. So that'll sort of fade into the background more, and it will deteriorate. It's like everybody here. We're all getting older. We're all getting older. You're smiling. Yes, that's right. Nothing lasts forever. No matter what you do, no matter how well you maintain something, it will always deteriorate. A few years ago, we looked at what internationally various governments were doing with their levees. We looked at the Dutch in particular and said, all right, what are you doing with your levees? What's your maintenance regime? And we did this for the UK stuff as well too. And we found exactly the same problem over there as well too. For a country that is below sea level, they know they've got big problems with their sea walls and all the rest of it, and all the money that they can pour into it, and even they can't have a brand new A1 levee all the time. It always deteriorates. So will your levee. So allow for that longer term thinking into the future, and that's what the freeboard is for as well too anyway. So that's the
So key recommendation is...
Key recommendation is... Yeah,
just 600.
No, you will decide what the freeboard is, but I'm giving you a guideline. Just go to there. This is what we did for Wagga. Copy. Do the same thing here. Get your reference group together, get with council and go, all right, there's smart people on the reference group, practical people as well too. You can work it out yourself anyway. Yeah, and then come to a decision for yourself to go, yeah, this is what we think is appropriate in this instance. Now, even though the designer said 300 millimetres of freeboard, in some instances you haven't got 300 millimetres of freeboard. You might have 200, you might have 100. In one instance you've got 10 millimetres. That wasn't obvious in their report. I had to do some calculations to go, oh, hang on, that's what they've done. So it wasn't obvious what they did. So I sort of look at it and go, well, council's looked at it, flood modellers looked at it, Jacobs have looked at it, and other consultants looked at it. Everybody's looked at it, and the only ones that have picked up a problem is me. So I can't blame anybody in particular because I'd have to blame everybody. But the facts are the facts. Take one number from another number and you're left with 10 millimetres. I did the calculation 5 times. 5 times to make sure that I wasn't doing something wrong. It's there in black and white. Again, I'm not making anything up. So again, you've got a number of issues, regardless of the freeboard you use. If magically you go, yep, we're happy with 300 millimetres of freeboard, that's fine, then you don't have that at every location anyway. So you're going out there and fixing up low spots in your levee, and I can guarantee you during a flood, I've dealt a lot with water and a lot of you guys have as well too, the one spot where it's low, that's where the flood water's going to go. I can guarantee it. Murphy's Law. Murphy's Law. It'll happen. So that's another big issue that you've got. The other issue, and I'm as I said, jumping around a bit to sort of thing, the flood modelling. It's all external. It's all coming from outside of the town, outside of the levee. It hits the levee in the model, water heads northward around there and through the creek there sort of thing, and you look at the plans or maps that have been produced. There's no water in Carisbrook. Well, yes, there will be, because the one thing it does not do is allow rain to fall in Carisbrook in the model. The design flood event that they chose for the flood modelling for the Western levee is 70.5 millimetres of rain in total, falling in 6 hours. Almost 3 inches of rain falling in 6 hours. Have a think about that. Have a think about that. That's a lot of rain to fall in 6 hours. One thing I'll guarantee you, if there's 70 millimetres of rain falling just on the outside of the levee in 6 hours, there'll be 70 millimetres of rain falling inside the levee in 6 hours. In 2010, I was living at Hay in New South Wales. They've got a levee system. The 2010 flood come through. We had 119 millimetres of rain overnight. 119 millimetres. It bucketed down. I've told this story a few times before, but first reaction from the townspeople was, bloody council, the stormwater pipes are closed. Oh, bloody council, they've caused the problem. Well, council were very quick to turn around and go, no, all our stormwater pipes are open. The flood went through about 5-7 days beforehand, so they'd opened up all their stormwater pipes, but still, water pooled everywhere, it was getting into people's houses, you name it, causing a big problem. What I'm recommending is do an internal flood study. We do them in New South Wales. We've been doing them since about 2016, thereabouts, because based on our experience at Hay, and then in 2012 we had another big rain event over in Wagga. Again, they've got a levee, bucketed down rain, and they ended up having to get a big pump from Western Australia. Half the size of this room, plonked it on the road, whopping great big pipes to suck the water out of the lagoons over the levee into the other side. So we learned our lesson from those two events. Look at what's happening inside the levee, because to us, it doesn't matter where the water started at Marysborough, works its way down here and floods a house, or if it rains enough to flood the house is still flooded. No if buts or maybes, it happens. So do an internal flood study. Pretty easily done. You've already got the model. You might need to adjust the model because some ground levels have changed since they did it in 2011. People have built houses and a few things like that sort of thing, but nothing too major. And then you just get the modellers to do what's called a rain on grid model. Basically making it rain, and you'll see an example in the report where my colleague Bob Clark did it for the town of Curlwa. He did it in 2022 during a flood event because Western Murray Irrigation, SES, wanted to know where did we need to put the pumps? Where do we need to put the pumps? And Bob said, I can do this. Perfect sense. It made perfect sense to them.
Fred, can I just ask you a question about that model you're talking about? If you did that within the Levee model, what kind of outcomes might come from that? I mean, what could be learnt from that, and what sort of actions could be taken? I mean,
okay,
not saying specifically, but what sort of things could
Okay, what you will find is it's making it rain on the Mike flood model, and water will flow. Water will flow where it wants to from the rain event, and it will flow, part of it will go into the bluestone drains, part of it will pool where it wants to. It'll pool underneath houses, it will pool potentially inside houses. Because what you're doing, you're going to be running a few scenarios, as in 1 in 5, 10, 20, 50, 100, 200 rain events. But what you're going to find is, for example, 70 millimetres of rain falling in town in 6 hours is a hell of a lot of water, and you're going to determine what houses are flood prone, what areas are flood prone. So it's going to assist council as well too to go, hang on, maybe we should be restricting development out over in this area because it floods, but in this other area over here, well, that might be okay for development. Yes, we might have to build up houses as well too, or mound them up or something like that sort of thing too. One curious thing, this is a little bit of an aside I suppose, in New South Wales we have a house raising and house buyback scheme as part of floodplain management measures. I sort of got the impression from the latest 2022 flood review that you don't sort of have that down here. Yeah, okay. It was just curious sort of thing. I thought it was Australia-wide, but yeah, but those sort of things, that sort of information comes out of it. Where you could build, where you can't build. If you can build, how high do you need to raise it up as well too. And if you do something internally, for example, theoretically, a big subdivision that you might want to develop in the future, for example, well, what do you need to do that? And then you can model, well, if we do that, that means water that would have gone in there no longer goes in there. Well, what happens to the water? It's got to go somewhere. It'll go around the side or somewhere else. It might affect another property as well too anyway. So those sort of things, and it's easily enough done. Just go to the modellers and say, do it please. Bang, it'll be done. And what they end up doing is modelling what happens when there is no flood in the creek, what happens normally if you just get a rain event, and then they go, well, let's have the flood in the creek, your flat valves for your stormwater drains closed, etc., etc. What happens then? And then you compare the two. So you come up with a difference sort of thing there anyway. So that I think is going to be very useful to you, because a number of the concerns that I've heard isn't outside the levee, it's actually inside town here. That's where you need to concentrate on as well too. The other thing that was quite evident to me, especially in the 2013 flood study, the Pyrenees Highway to Bucknell Street, then along Bucknell Street to the railway and a bit beyond, that functions as a levee. You can see it in the flood results, the modelling results. Water comes round there, gets in the creek, out of the creek, up around the houses on the other side of Bucknell Street there, comes up to the road, and that's where it stops. So I'm suggesting start thinking of Bucknell Street and the Pyrenees Highway as de facto levees. As I say in there, if it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it's a duck. I've gone to plenty of councils and said, I want to do an inspection, an audit on your levee. Can you tell me where it is, please? Yeah, no worries. It's down here, along there. Not too sure where in the middle of town, but pick it up on the other side and away we go. And then I go, well, hang on, there's a couple of roads in town. They wouldn't be built up a little bit, would they? Oh, yeah, well, I suppose they are built up. So they're probably a levee, aren't they? Oh, well, yeah, I guess once you think about it, they are. It's just having that sort of thinking to go, yeah, a levee doesn't need to be 10 metres high, doesn't need to be out in the middle of a paddock or anything like that. You've got Pleasant Street. Pleasant Street is your levee on the western side. Well, there's some road. That's a road. There's a road here. So start thinking about that as well too anyway.
With the levees that do go around Carisbrook, what percentage of them is below the 300 mil?
There are points. There's probably 8 or 10 points that I picked up, and those points are from the Entura the Entura design report that I've been able to, as I said, subtract one number from the other to get a level. So there's a good 8 or 10 points. One of the recommendations I'm making is go every single metre along the levee, and it's pretty easy to do. You've got GIS, you've got the flood modelling results, you've got the workers executed drawings, you've got design plans, etc. It just takes a bit of time to go through it. I did one for Williams Road down the cemetery sort of thing. It was only pretty short to do, so I did it to show you what the issues are down there anyway. But that's the thing, as I said, water gets in anywhere it can. You've really got to check every single metre, especially when you've only got a 300 millimetre freeboard. If the freeboard was 600 millimetres or 700 millimetres, probably wouldn't make that much of a difference really, because you little imperfections here and there. You go, oh yeah, well we didn't quite make the 750 there, but 700, okay, we can live with 700. But because you've only got 300 millimetres, and I'll perhaps use that as an example, probably a little bit shorter than, 250, 300 millimetres. That's what we're talking about. That's the freeboard. You'll notice in my report, and this is something that I've done, but it's nothing spectacular. What I've done, you'll see a number of the plans where there's pink, where the floodwaters are. The pink means a depth of water less than 250 millimetres. 250 millimetres. Bugger all. South of the Pyrenees Highway, where the culverts are, south there, all that gets flooded. I'll do two things on that one. The first thing, it's out in the paddocks, a lot of pink out in the paddocks. What happens when the landholders goes, I want to plough in some feed oats, I want to feed my sheep. I'm going to plough that paddock up and plant some oats there. Do you think you'll plough it up to 5 millimetres? No. You'll plough it up like this, plough, grow the crops. That, for 250 millimetres of water, that has a big effect on where the water goes. What if he goes, just want to do a little contour bank here. Drops the blade of the tractor, just do a little bank. It's my paddock, I can do what I want, won't affect flooding. 250 millimetres. how small a bank do you think he'll make if he just drops the blade a bit? 250 millimetres. Doesn't take much. As I said, if you had 750 millimetres of freeboard, that wouldn't be as consequential. But because you've only got 300 millimetres of freeboard, it's a big consequence. The next issue I found was at the Pyrenees Highway itself. The culverts under there, they're big long sort of thing. They might look big to you, but they're not actually that big in reality in terms of the comparison to the volume of water that they're to carry. When I first looked at it, I go, hang on, this is a stormwater detention basin. Why did they do that? You usually do it to slow the water down and stop it from going somewhere downstream or something like that. Quite puzzling to me. I rang up Water Tech. I said, why did you make it a stormwater detention basin? They go, I don't know, we didn't. Well, yes, you did. So they didn't even know they were making it as a stormwater detention basin. The thing with a stormwater detention basin, it's a big basin and a really small outlet. The analogy I use is, think of the MCG, packed crowd, the final whistle blows, everybody wants to get out of the MCG, only they've got one gate open. What do you think is going to happen? Everything backs up. People just back up and back up and back up behind there. And that's exactly what happens at the Pyrenees Highway. That water gets to the culverts underneath there, it can't get away quick enough, so it backs up, backs up, backs up, backs up. So when you look at the video animation that was done, you can see that happening. Once you look for it, you can see it happening. And that dictates the height of the levee south of the highway, because you're effectively making that a dam. So the water level is along the levee, and you add 300 millimetres to that, and that's the crest height of the levee. Because the modellers didn't realise that they were designing or modelling it as a stormwater detention basin, they didn't do everything correctly. I spoke to another one of my guys who does stormwater detention basin designs all the time. He goes, oh yeah, I can see what they've done. What they've done is, from the Raub's model, they've picked the storm, the 6-hour storm event that has the biggest instantaneous flow rate coming in to that area. But they could have picked other storm events, like they modelled 2-hour, 3-hour, 6-hour, 9, 12, 15, 18, 21, up to 72 hours duration. Different quantities of water or rain in those storm events. For example, the 3-hour storm events or storm event, it has 50 or 60 millimetres of rain in total. So what my detention basin designer said to me, he said, yeah, that probably could work. However, not in all instances. You need to run every single one of those storm events through the Mike flood model to satisfy yourself that in all scenarios it will work. You can't not do it. Okay, so you've got to redo some flood modelling anyway, and that sort of opens up a good avenue for exploration as well anyway. If you're going to be doing that for all those different storm events, you go, all right, pick the worst case out of that. Once you've done that, why not model 2, 4, 6, whatever many extra culverts under the highway? Because at the moment I can't see any particular reason why you need to throttle the flow going under the highway. You've got to remodel it, full stop. You have to remodel it. If I had a bucket load of money, what would I do with Pleasant Street? I'll get onto that in a second. It's more costly to raise the Pyrenees Highway, full stop, but not impossible. I've gone to plenty of locations, gone to our Transport for New South Wales and said, guys, we're going to be raising up that road there. You may not like it, but don't worry, it's not going to cost you anything because it's part of the Levee project. Oh, okay, well, that's all right, that's all right. Okay, so that can happen as well too. Now, in terms of your question about should there be a spillway, one characteristic I've seen in Victoria is don't incorporate spillways into your levees at all. In New South Wales we can and sometimes do, but I don't see that down here. But that's something you may want to look at in the future. But again, you wouldn't have 50 millimetres above the design flood level for a spillway. Well, it'll be pretty hard to wash the Pyrenees Highway away. It's pretty solid. Every day I see traffic going over it. It's well compacted. Anyway, I'll move on. So I can't see any real reason why the culvert needs to be throttled. Why not open it up a bit more, sort of thing, because it's only going to benefit. It's only going to benefit. That in turn leads us to the railway line as well too. Well, you know, the history of that, you know, once upon a time, State Rail said, no, you've got to put culverts there, big rigmarole process. Now they've said, oh, okay, you can take out the railway line, which is what's happened up near High Street. They've taken out a section of the railway line and the drain next to it comes through, sort of thing. You might, and probably will do, have to look at doing something up there as well too to get the water away as quickly. So if you're modelling more culverts at the Pyrenees Highway, model more culverts or do something up at the railway line itself anyway. Pleasant Street. Pleasant Street has, you know, freeboard, but not the highest freeboard in all locations. When it gets up to the top to High Street, there's only about 10 millimetres, right where it sort of deviates in and goes around, sort of thing. Not the best place where you want to fumble on your freeboard. And that's what they did. The other thing, halfway between Pleasant Street and Chaplin Road, along the railway culvert, about halfway along, there's a culvert and bridge under the railway line. It's about 16 metres wide. Landholder on the northern side has built a little bank around there and put in a 700 millimetre diameter pipe. I'm sure he's looked at it and gone, oh, I'm just sick of this nuisance water coming in underneath here. I'm just going to do something there to fix my little problem. Not realising that that's an important flow path for floodwaters. And the thing is, it comes across the highway down, Greg, where's the road? Potts Road. Comes across there, goes into the paddocks, hits the railway line, comes along the railway line and is supposed to duck under the bridge, in the culvert, I should say, under the railway line there. If it can't get underneath there, it's just going to continue along to Pleasant Street and High Street, where you're doubling up the amount of water and you haven't got the right freeboard there anyway. So it's just going to be a big mess in that area. And when I say mess, water's going to overflow Pleasant Street and come into town. If you wanted a spillway, there's a spillway. But you do not want a spillway. You do not want a spillway there. Personally, I wouldn't even worry about trying to do any spillway along this section here. I don't think it's warranted myself. That's just my opinion. Just have a consistent freeboard all the way through. Moving on a bit further.
Is that question?
Okay. Moving on a bit further. The entire bed of Pleasant Street is a levee.
No, it's not.
Yes, it is.
Down further it drops a lot lower, so it's nothing to do with the levee down further. There's no
Down towards the race course.
correct.
Okay, I'll get to that in a minute. Okay, moving up to Wills Street. There's been some misconception, and it's even in the operations and maintenance manual that Jenny have drafted. They've said, oh, you know, the levee goes down Wills Road, Wills Street. No, it doesn't. There's a ramp off Pleasant Street onto Wills Street. The drain beside the levee goes away from the levee, goes halfway down Wills Street, across the causeway. I've named it Greg's Causeway. Across the causeway, over into the racecourse, and away up there. Wills Street is not a levee. It was never designed to be a levee, although it's been misnamed as being a levee. The levee continues on, this is from the design plans, all the way up Pleasant Street, up to almost the rise, up the top there. That's what's on the design plans. I'm only reading on what the design plans tell me. I don't know if that's 100% correct with the workers' executed drawings. That was built like that?
I'm not arguing the point that you're making, that you believe that's where the levee is supposed to be. The point that I'm trying to make is that up towards the Pyrenees Highway, where the road has been raised significantly to mitigate that water, and obviously what you're saying comes back into your yard around the railway line, where the railway line intersects Pleasant Street. As you go further back down towards Bucknell Street, where it meets the Bendigo turnoff, that road tapers off significantly, and the height of that road is nowhere near the height of what the Pyrenees Highway would be. Otherwise, the water would flow out and back into Tulleroo Creek further up.
Okay. What happens with the modelling in the flood, it comes across Wills Street, goes into the racecourse area, and before it gets to high ground, it's tapering across towards the racecourse itself. That's what the modelling says happens. I saw the 2022 video that was done, and I can certainly see water out that way, but you people are better knowing exactly what happens. But that's the theory, that's the modelling. It goes, in essence, a little bit further up from Wills Street into the racecourse area, and then deviates across to the racecourse itself. Now that brings me to another point. When we get to the end of the levee on Pleasant Street, the design plans go, shoot across towards the racecourse, some 300, 500 metres, something or other like that, and that's where the levee stops. Council advised that they didn't construct that section of the levee from Pleasant Street into the racecourse area because the ground levels were high enough. Okay, I'll take them at their word. They went out there and their staff and go, oh, the ground levels are actually high enough. We don't need to build up any more. What that points to is something's wrong with survey levels. Either the LiDAR's wrong or their survey's wrong. Their survey, I'll bet you bottom dollar, went to state survey marks, pins in the ground, around town sort of thing, picked them up. Oh, these are the levels I'm getting. But the design, and certainly the modelling, was done using LiDAR. They can't both be right. Either one's right, or the other's right, or both are wrong. I don't know. So I'm actually recommending getting a registered surveyor in, go around all the safe state survey marks around town, and there won't be that many, and re-level them all to find out exactly what the true level is to Australian height datum. And then when they're out there, take some cross sections out in the floodplain to check the LiDAR. This is what we picked up with it's an RTK, a staff, shall we say, they use RTK instruments. This is what we found using that instrument. They can compare that to what they found with the LiDAR. I can quote you 2 instances, flood projects, that they found that the LiDAR was wrong. They'd had LiDAR from some years ago, did the modelling, did the designs, then they found there was inaccuracies in the LiDAR, then they had to go back, reflow the LiDAR, redo the modelling, redo the designs. So don't assume the LiDAR is absolutely perfect either. It may not be, I don't know, but it needs checking. Something's wonky, that needs to be checked as well too. Now maybe in answer to part of your question too, what we do in New South Wales is recommend to councils that they do a crest level survey of their levee every 5 years. I'm not saying every council does it every 5 years, but that's something we recommend to be done as well too. For those very reasons, things wear out. There's erosion that occurs and little things like that. And sometimes you're walking along a levee, done that plenty of times yourself, everything looks good. Surveyors come in beforehand, you go, oh, that point there is a bit low. You go, oh, geez, yeah, okay, I'll believe you. You can't pick it by eye. You can't pick it by eye. I've tried for many years, and when you're talking 300 millimetres or less, I've gone down on one knee and I'm squinting one eye and looking this way, and I go, oh, if I look that way, I think I can see that going down. But if I look that way, that's going down. They can't both be going down. So I take what you say and go, yeah, there seems to be something wrong with Pleasant Street, but I can say, damn hard to pick by eye. I've got one dicky eye and I can squint pretty good and I can't pick it up. So you need to do your levels anyway. So that's an issue there. Going around a bit further, all the way over to Eddington Road, there's a big culvert underneath there. You'll see this, and a lovely little photo in the report, on the downstream side of that culvert. It's filled with reeds. Reeds so high, they're as high as the road surface itself. Effectively, you may as well fill up those culverts with concrete, because that's how much those reeds are blocking the culverts. Yeah, it might be Vic Roads or whatever who own the culverts, but it doesn't help because you're relying on that to get the water away. And if it's blocked, it ain't going to work. It's as simple as that. You don't need to be an engineer to know that ain't going to work. So you got that to take care of, and Keith reminded me again today, in a paddock there's a couple of dams in there as well too, so really once you clean away the reeds and everything else, have a look at the impact of those dams as well too, because that could be blocking just as much those culverts as well anyway.
Could we open it up to questions? Because I think that's probably one of the main last points. Is there?
Oh no, I've got a couple few more. Okay, be quick. Going around a bit further, I can see in the 2013 mitigation options, clean out the creek. That's a big mitigation option. Yes, I can see it in the modelling. That's what you voted on. I can see in the modelling how they've modelled it, but in reality, in my opinion, you need to go harder. Factor of safety, variability, etc., you just need to go harder in there, because I look at the 2013 flood modelling results, and as I've said before, even when the creek is cleaned out in the model, water's just butting up against the edge of the road anyway. So you're a hair's breadth away from Carisbrook being flooded. Moving along a bit further, over near the school, there's flap valves there. When I was here last, two big burly blokes, I said, can you try and lift one of those flaps, please? They couldn't. They're steel. They're steel. They're not a bit of plastic that float on top of the water. They're damn heavy. So they're going to cause more problems being closed than they are providing assistance to you during a flood. In there, I'm suggesting a bit of steel work, a boat winch, lift the damn things up. 99% of the time they're just going to stay there, and then during a flood you go, oh, we've got to close them now, and that's when you close them. So that's an issue there as well too. The other thing was a suggestion. It's not a recommendation, it's a suggestion for your consideration, is a flood cache. In New South Wales, with SES really, I'll give them definitely the credit. After every flood event, inquiry's done, SES didn't have enough resources, didn't have enough people to go out to everywhere, etc. All right, well, we'll do better this time. Next time comes around, same story. In big flood events, there's just never enough people, never enough SES blokes, never enough CFA people, whatever sort of thing there anyway. You guys end up doing the work. Brian over there, for the past 20 years, been going around and checking things and cleaning out drains and all the rest of it. You guys do it yourself. So basically what it is a shipping container, sandbags, shovels, whatever else you need in there, put it in there and you get the keys. It's not SES in Maryborough or Bendigo or whatever. You guys have the keys. And that's what they're doing now in New South Wales. They've done about a dozen and they've probably done even more. Again, I'm getting out of what I've been engaged to do. I'm just saying maybe that's something you do want to consider as an option for you anyway. Last thing in the back of the report, Yagara. In the back of the report, there's a satellite image I downloaded of Yagara being flooded in 2022. About a year or so beforehand, our Bathurst office was helping out the council with the construction management of a couple of levees either side of Puzzle Flat Creek that came in from the east. The council, the landholders, ratepayers, the SES all said that's their big problem. Puzzle Flat Creek, that's where all our flooding comes from. In 2022, it didn't come from there. It came barrelling down from the north Mendagerie Creek, wiped it out. Just the other week, I was looking at a map showing where all the temporary housing was for those community members. They're in Forbes, they're in Parks, they're all over the place, and a few in Gowra. So here it is 2 years later and people are still living in temporary accommodation. Lesson learnt. Have a think about McCallum's Creek. There's huge volumes of water coming in there and it's a characteristic of floodplain management. You might have fixed up one problem, but there's another problem waiting in the wings for you to solve. Thank you very much. I've talked enough.
You can probably keep the microphone. What I might do is just, there was a few hands went up before. I'm sort of not too bad at keeping an order, so have those hands up again. Oh, yeah, that's good, that's good. All right, and we can keep going. We've got some time, so over to you first, and I'll give you this.
Oh.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks, Brett. I've got just like a general question about how the process will unfold from this point forward. So, and I guess we have to assume that there's enough levies and they're in the correct location. So given that, and given the fact that you'll agree upon a freeboard height, what is the very next process? Is it flood modelling internally and externally around the levee?
Oh. Okay, there's going to be a few wins that are pretty easy. I'm suggesting down at the cemetery, construct a small little levee around there. You really don't need to worry about too much the flood modelling there. It's only 250 mil of water around there. Greg used to own a property down there. He's aware of the old levees that were there that no longer. Easy win, easy win. You know, fix up the drain, you know, the flat valve there, another easy win as well too. You guys get together and go, let's do a freeboard assessment. That's another easy win. Then after you do that, you go, well, what are we going to do about it? You go, all right, if you've got a big bucket of money, you go, all right, well, we're going to redesign it. The good thing I see with the levees that you've got, especially the levee to the south of the highway, is you've got 3.5 metres wide. You don't need a levee crest 3.5 metres wide. We only design them 3 metres anyway, so you've got a bit of scope there to raise them up a bit more sort of thing. But that one there, you really do need to model, because you might not have picked the right design, or the modellers might not have picked the right design storm event anyway. Then you've got some other locations, like Pleasant Street, you know, High Street, Pleasant Street in there. You might go, we've got to do something there. How quickly can you do something there? That's going to need, I think, a road redesign, because you've got terrible intersection, you've got bends and this, that and the other and all this sort of stuff, and you've got sight distances to consider, and obviously people's safety when they're travelling along there as well too. So that's going to be a little bit more to do as well anyway. So basically, as I see it, the next thing you need to do, if council go, yep, Fred, you're wonderful, we're going to adopt every recommendation you've given us, then you've got to sit down and you go, right, what can we do now? What can we do a little bit later? And what's a longer term sort of thing? Because I didn't put it in the report, but one thing from the 2013 report was a long-term goal is replace the bridge across here. Well, don't know when that's going to happen, but you go, well, that's definitely a long-term aspirational goal there anyway. So I'd suggest look at 3, short, medium, long term wins sort of thing. Yes, we can do these in the short term, medium term, longer term. Like there's other things, if you treat Pyrenees Highway and Bucknell Street as a de facto levee, well, you've got a number of culverts under your de facto levee. Well, what are you going to do there? Well, you're going to put some maybe flat valves in there, or gate valves, or you might put a temporary plug in or something like that. Again, that's an easy win where you can use the expertise of the reference group and go, well, what are we going to do in this location? What are we going to do in that location? And those are the things that you're going to have to go, well, during a big enough flood event, we're going to be turning them off. How do we do that? When do we do it? What's the trigger levels and all that sort of stuff? So, and I'm pointing to the reference group guys, because I'll bet you bottom dollar you're the ones that are going to be doing it.
Not all guys.
Very true. Very true. Very true, because you'll be out there just as much as everybody else getting wet.
Question there, then I'll go back up to you, Pam. So there's a question here. So there's one there too, isn't it? Okay. Okay, no, you go.
When this group was formed, both the concerned Carisbrook residents and council agreed that we would all accept Fred's findings, and that was fantastic. What has never been confirmed is what, if any, of the recommendations council would actually take on board. What I want to know now, tonight, is, Elizabeth, today I heard you say you can't guarantee if any or all of those recommendations will be approved. What I'm wanting to know is, can you give us your word that you and Lucy will do everything in your power to convince the other councillors that this is actually important and that it needs to be done as soon as possible, and hopefully that all the work will be done as soon as possible before the next storm event?
What's that?
I think you're referring while in caretaker.
Are you referring, so we're going in caretaker mode real soon. Under the 2020 Act, council can't make any decisions that will impact the next council. So we only have a few weeks. I can't promise that what you're asking is going to happen in a few weeks.
When caretaker mode ends,
Yep.
how do we know that any of these recommendations are going to actually be accepted?
Yeah, please do.
So I might answer that question. So what we propose to do, we've got the report now, and the councillors had Fred's presentation today, which was terrific. So we've got 2 council meetings left. So to be realistic, we would like to bring it to the September council meeting with recommendations. One of the things we're also, the staff are looking at those recommendations and doing exactly what Fred was talking about, is trying to understand short, medium, longer term costings, those sorts of things, so that we can put forward, proper recommendations. And of course, still working with the reference group who, have been such a great guidance. So I'm pretty confident that report can go up before caretaker, and so there will be certainty for the community about what we can do. I think, like anything, some of it may be subject to funding requirements, might have to do a little bit of work. So all of the recommendations, I think Fred probably agreed too, wouldn't necessarily be able to be done, in the short term, but we'll be looking at the ones that are the most important or the most effective and cost effective and all those sorts of things. So a plan will be put together, and the reference group most certainly will be part of that.
I'll try and keep order. I know that's probably prompting a follow-up question, isn't it, Greg?
Yes.
Is it really quick?
Then we already know the 600,000 should be there. So that should be a start to get some of the short period stuff. And then I know we're going to be waiting for funding, but there is at the present time, like the funding coming from the catchment authority. That money should be able to be used to do all the design work that Fred's and the remodelling that Fred's suggesting. That's 300 grand, I believe.
So there's $300,000 grant to do some of that remodelling and flood study stuff. So absolutely, which is great. And I think we've got the agreement from state government for that, and so that agreement will be finalised, and we just have to agree with them what type of work will happen, and this will inform some of that. So we most certainly have that. We've got some money left over from the levee, and there are also some other opportunities for funding North Central Catchment Management Authority and state government for all sorts of different bits of work. So again, when you're looking at the recommendations, we can categorise them into those different groupings and work out which bits of money can fund which parts.
Was the $600,000 carried over in this year's budget?
The $600,000 is related to our contribution to the levee that was completed a year or two ago, and it didn't get carried forward because we didn't have agreed works to do. But, in terms of council's own cash contribution to any of this, we always review budgets mid-year and we can have a look at what's available. But there's also a lot of grant opportunities as well, so we most certainly were looking at all of those grant opportunities. Sometimes.
Wasn't 1 or 2 years ago. That was only just what was finished in the last construction period. So that's not 1 or 2 years ago, and that is money the council was supposed to put in. So where is that money?
I'm just saying that council, when we do a budget, we reset the budget every year, and if we don't have a project to carry forward money for specifically, we don't just leave it there. So that's what a mid-year review will do. You look at your capital works program and all your other budget items, and you can, can reset your budget at certain times of the year if you need to.
Why was the levy closed, signed off as completed, when the council was well aware of all the defects that this committee's been arguing with you for nearly 2 years about?
What money could have been used for?
And where's the money going in?
I think there's probably not a lot more you can say about that now, but that's a question that's being asked.
Max, you say that. This is short-term repairs for people's peace of mind and community. And it's $600,000 that's supposed to be there.
I don't know whether there's anything more that Lucy can say to that. I could pick up you're not satisfied with the answer, but I don't know. That's the answer.
It wasn't finished, wasn't fixed, but the mid-year review took money away. So.
I'm just going to say that, what we're talking about at the moment with the report that we've got, we don't have costings on that report. So it could be that the work that's required is well beyond 600,000. It may not be anywhere near as much as that. And the 300,000 for the flood study most certainly covers a big part of the cost. So I don't think that we should be focused on that. I think, it's not... Until we don't have costings for all of the recommendations, and some of them, I think, as Fred's pointed out this evening, are really easy, quick wins, and they may not actually be super costly, and others might require a bit more work and flood modelling and design, which will take a little bit of time anyway. So that's the work we have to do next, is to work out the short, medium and longer term options and what they all cost. So we need the time to do that.
I'm conscious that there's quite a few other questions. There was one in the front here, I think. Was there a question?
Yeah, it was partly answered by Fred. I'd just like to ask how far down that creek can you clean out? It's obviously rotten to be away. The water gets in, it's got to get out. The Carisbrook, old Carisbrook reservoir, was that in the plans anywhere with a retarding basin? And I've seen since the levee bank done, I've run along Pleasant Street and there's a crossing there to get into the farmer's paddock. I've seen the water up that. Another inch of rain would have been over.
Okay. The reservoir you're talking down at near the tip?
Yeah.
Yep. No, it hasn't been modelled as a dam as such in the model, because that's actually in the Raub's model, not in the Mike Flood model. So that hasn't explicitly been modelled as a dam to go through the system. Whether it's big enough or not is open to debate, but I can say categorically, no, it has not been included. How you want it included, I'm not too sure what the answer to that is, because as I understand it, it's just a storage dam. It's
Too much money involved.
Could be too, and it's spillway, so any water that gets in there, once it gets to a full level, goes out a spillway around the side and flows out again anyway. So for all intents and purposes, it's a transparent reservoir from the model anyway.
Spillway, I think was put in the last of it.
Yeah, I think it might have been. Yep. I don't disagree with you that the culvert in the drain going into a landholder's property might have been pretty close to being full in 2022. I don't disagree with you.
Well, putting up a couple of culverts in the highway, it's going to reciprocate.
Well, that's what the modelling picks up. You go, well, yes, a couple more culverts down there. Well, we need to open up the railway line up here. Well, we need to do something up a bit further or whatever. That's the great thing about having these sophisticated models, is you can play those what-if scenarios. Model one, there's a problem up here. Well, stop the model, add some culverts or do whatever you need to up a bit further, rerun the model. Something else has happened up here, rerun it up there as well. So you just rerun it until you get a good enough answer that you're after. Sorry, what was your other question? In the modelling, I can see in the 2013 modelling, I'll be very specific, they've gone from the railway culvert back upstream to the Pyrenees Bridge, around the bend to, I'm not too sure which road, up to there. So that they've modelled all that in the model to go, that needs to be cleaned out. And in the model, once they did that, then that stopped Carisbrook from being flooded.
Cleaning out above Carisbrook stops Carisbrook from being flooded.
No, I said from the railway bridge downstream, from the railway bridge, from the bridge itself. From the bridge itself, down here. You guys know what I'm talking about? Yep. That's right. That's one. That one right there. That's right. It keeps going further. But what I'm saying is, in the model, they went from the railway line through town, right up to the highway bridge, upstream of the highway bridge around to Virginia Street or whatever, in the model, and said, what they do is change the roughness, but don't worry about that. So all that area in there in the model was cleaned out, and that produced the result in the model. And that's what they're trying to reproduce, or what you would try and reproduce as well too. Personally, I'd go a bit further downstream and a bit further upstream myself, but it is what the model is.
Okay, some things might need further conversation. As I said, after 8 o'clock, Brett's going to be around. I want to try and capture people who've been waiting patiently. Ian, I think you had your hand up, and there was someone else there.
Fred, can you just touch on the 2 pipes that run through the levee itself?
Okay, thank you very much for reminding me. South of the Pyrenees Highway, there are 2 pipes underneath the levee. One down a fair way and one up near the Bluestone drain near Greg's paddock up there, sort of thing. The first one down the bottom end, in the 2013 report, and I think maybe the Interior report, it said, you've got to put a pipe there under the levee to water a wetland. There is no wetland. I can't see one on any map. I spoke to the CMA and I said, Camille, you're the CMA, you must know where a wetland is. What's this all about? She didn't know either. And she said, I think it probably stemmed from a little conversation I had with one of the council guys. I just said something along the lines, geez, it'd be nice to water the trees down there. And somehow or other it morphed into, there's a wetlands down there, we've got to put a pipe under the levee. It serves no purpose other than cause you worry. It'll cause me worry. A few years ago we looked at all the defects in levees and what failure probabilities each of those would have in terms of how that would cause a levee to fail or otherwise. And the big standout thing was stormwater pipes under and through levees. They are by far the biggest risk factor that you will encounter. What happens is there's a hole. Let's face facts, there's a hole right through the levee from one side to the other. That's a stormwater pipe. Over the years what happens is the pipes move and jiggle around a bit, and that's just nature. That's just what happens. So over time they'll jiggle apart and whatever. My strong recommendation is remove it, and if you can't remove it, put a gate valve on it, put a padlock on it and close the damn thing, but you're still going to have to monitor it anyway. The second one up closer, near Greg's paddock there, sort of thing. In the 2013 modelling, it said there's a big low area on the other side of the levee. The last of the water has to drain, therefore put a pipe through the levee, and that'll be used to drain the last of the water out of there, otherwise it's just going to sit next to the levee, etc, etc. What Intura did was they constructed a drain on the outside of the levee from the bottom end right up to the highway, and as I understand, council said no, continue on further, so they continued on the drain all the way up to the racecourse. From the design levels in the Intura report, that's the high end. It flows all the way to Pyrenees Highway, flows down past the railway line, flows down even further to the racecourse. Every metre of that drain falls. So the reason for having a pipe there to drain a low area doesn't exist, because any water that sits in that low area is just going to go into the drain, and the drain will take the water away up to the racecourse.
So in short, the recommendation is to get
remove
rid of
it. Get rid of that one too. It doesn't.
Let's keep going. There's a gentleman there, I think you were waiting in the green planet shirt. You didn't have a question? It must have been.
I had one.
Okay.
Next to Greg asked.
That's all right. No, go.
No,
you're good. Okay. There was another. I think Leonie.
I had one. I'm just harping back on the fact of caretaking coming into effect, and considering that Lucy's also leaving the council, wouldn't it be something that council and councillors could look at and call an emergency meeting to discuss this before it goes in caretaker, and also before you get new people coming in, because they're going to have to catch up on everything that's been going on. Surely, Lucy and councillors could call an emergency meeting to discuss this, to give some reassurance for the community.
I can answer that. What I was saying was that they can actually decide on it before they go into caretaker. Don't need an emergency meeting. They've got 2 council meetings between now and the 17th of September. So there are 2 meetings. They don't need to call an emergency one. They will be able to, they'll be able to consider it before going into caretaker. Yeah.
Because I think it's really, like, there's a lot of concern. And I think before it goes into that caretaker meeting, before there's new councillors coming, it has to be sorted. We're putting a lot of work, the reference group, and we've worked really hard together, and everybody has gotten so well together. I think it's the best committee I've ever been on, and we're getting somewhere. And then with Fred, what he's done, I think it's a credit to all of us. And I want to see it go out.
Thanks, Leonie. Are there any further questions?
Fred also explained to the people that we also, in their estimates and everything like that, they allowed for a dry, for the whole catchment to be dry, and they've missed out on that margin, which is also going to make a big difference.
Okay, 2 things. I'll come back to your point in a second. Basically, I'm driving back to Wagga tomorrow. Thursday morning, I've just got a couple of little things to fix up in the draft report, add your point into there, which won't take me that long to do. So I hope to have the final report on Teams Thursday or Friday this week, something along those sort of lines. Won't take me that long to finish off the report. To your point there anyway, in the modelling, standard practice is loss calculations. Water, when it falls in a dry catchment, for example, first lot of water soaks into the ground, fills up dams and things like that. It doesn't actually contribute to the flood. That's if there's a dry catchment. Now, what the modellers have assumed, and they did this for the calibration, and they appear to have kept they have kept it going along, because in the 2019 report they did re-look at the loss modelling, and what they've said was, we will assume the first 25 millimetres of rain that falls doesn't go towards the flood. It just soaks into the ground, filled up dams or whatever sort of thing. While they did look at different alternative loss models, they still came back to that one anyway. In the 2019 council flood plan, in the back of that, there's graphs and charts and things. Use this to estimate if you're going to get a flood or not or whatever. One thing in there, they say if there's a wet catchment, do it this way. If there's a dry catchment, do it another way. So that's the other thing that's come into it. So what I've been asked to do, and as I said, it won't take me that long to do, because the modellers are remodelling things anyway, ask them to look at, well, what if there's a wet catchment before the true flood comes along? What happens if it's wet a week before or 2 weeks or whatever? And the suggestion was the reference group get together, talk to some landholders around the place and go, because the modellers want direction. All right, you want me to model a wet catchment? How wet do you want it to be? So you guys and girls need to come up with, well, how wet do you want it to be? How much of the initial loss of rain do you want to rerun through the model and see what happens from there? So that's it. So again, it's just going to be another half a page or something or other. Again, it won't take me that long to do anyway.
That was the alarm that you heard for the end of the meeting officially. Thank you for that. That was awesome. Amber, did you have something you were going to say as well? Yeah, come down. Yeah. Does everyone know who Amber is?
Yeah, that's
This is Amber. Amber works at council.
Thanks, Max, and probably just reaffirming our position that a few of you asked about what's going to happen next. So the report was presented to councillors today. They were very impressed with the report. They were very taken by Fred and also the amount of work that the reference group have put into this as well. So there's been a request that this report is actually taken to a council meeting before the election period to receive that, and also a recommendation around that to for the reference group to begin working with staff on how we implement these recommendations as well. Now, Lucy mentioned that we've got an August council meeting, the September council meeting. Even if it does go to September, it doesn't mean that we stop here tonight. So there'll be a team of staff that come together next week to start having a really good look at those recommendations so that we can come back with the reference group and start working out what's that short, medium and long term. So there's definitely that commitment to receive the report and also to put council resources into continuing to working with that reference group to start implementing some of these actions as well.
And I think that brings us to an official close. And look, thank you everyone for your listening so intently, and Fred for doing that a third time today. You did well. You needed a bit of help from, so thank you. Look, all the best. I think my role kind of ends now. I'll be cheering you all on. I think it just goes to show how much can be achieved by council and community working closely together, and may that continue. I'm sure reference group will certainly be keeping a close eye on how things progress, as all you will, and the commitment is to take a very close look, council, at those recommendations. Some recommendations might require partnering with other agencies, like, harassing Vic Roads about cleaning out a culvert. So there's a whole bunch of things that will go into a plan, and the commitment is to take that very seriously, which is terrific. So well done, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your evening and hang around and with Fred, who's got nothing better to do than talk more about levies for the next couple of hours or so, maybe. Okay, thank you.